Yes.
Okay, good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting so far, if you haven't seen other videos of ours, my name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach. We're a boutique MBA admissions consulting and tutoring firm. I went to MIT for my undergrad, Wharton for my MBA, and been running Personal MBA Coach for the last 13 years. We help applicants around the world get into top schools. So we have a panel here of everyone today, and really appreciate everyone for kind of coming and joining. So we will be talking about switching careers through an MBA program. And we were just sort of talking offline before going live here. We have an interesting mix of folks, some people who, there are second year in the MBA program, some people who are just about to graduate, and some folks who've already graduated. So we can really hear, across time and how things have adjusted. So Taylor, I'll start with you. Then I'll go to Manolo, and then Katie, and then Lucia, and then Avinav. I'll just let you each introduce yourself. Just give a quick, kind of minute or so overview of, yourself, your background, and then we'll go into some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So hello, everybody. My name is Taylor Davis. I'm a second-year MBA student at Cornell Johnson. Prior to business school, I went to Howard University for undergrad. I joined Bank of America as an HR and decided to come back to business school so that I could pivot into finance. I'm really happy to be here and speak with all of you today.
Awesome. Hey, everybody, my name is Manolo Alvarez. I am a first-year MBA candidate at Texas McCombs. I actually did my undergrad at Texas McCombs, so it's round 2 for me. It's very exciting. My experience is in sales, operations, and business analytics across a whole host of firms like Oracle USA and Google, to name a few, and looking to actually pivot into finance as well, to corporate finance specifically. Yeah, glad to be here.
Katie, you can go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I've been having some technical difficulties. I'm sure we can all relate over these past couple of months. But yes, my name is Katie. I went to UVA for undergrad as well, so I'm also a repeater. I majored in art history while I was there, and then I've spent 4 years in Washington, D.C. working at a museum doing event sales and management. Decided to come back to Charlottesville to get my MBA, and now I'm going into financial services for wealth management.
Hello everyone, my name is Lucia. I am Italian. I've done both my bachelor and master's in aerospace engineering in Italy, and post-master's I've been working in the automotive industry for 6 years in manufacturing operations, and then I decided to go for an MBA at INSEAD, and I'm about to graduate in December.
Hi, my name is Avinav. I just graduated from Michigan Ross. I'm joining a consulting firm. I actually start next week. This is a Deloitte Consulting. That's where I interned last year. Before Ross, I used to work for Gartner. This was back in India, where I'm from. I was in a research and advisory role over there, and my undergrad was in mathematics, also from India.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Avinav, best of luck at Deloitte. I used to work there and talk at a lot of the Deloitte offices. So we have a lot of Deloitte folks as clients, so we can chat about that offline.
Thank you.
So yeah, first question, for those folks who are kind of looking to, to pivot here, right? So how do you think the MBA will help you pivot from one industry to another, right? And this is something that, clients often come to us and say, Scott, what can I really do and how much of a change can I make? And there's always that balance between writing something that you actually want to do and writing something that's going to, make sense. So for those of you that are looking to make a change, how do you think the MBA will help you, pivot? Feel free, whoever wants to kind of jump in.
I can go ahead. So I was one of those people who came into the program not knowing what I wanted to do at all. So I definitely was a huge career switcher from one industry to had every option in the world, I felt like, in front of me. I thought the MBA program was a really great way to distinguish what skills I had already developed and identifying how those would be applicable to a different career path. You already are developing so many skills, even if they're not in the industry you want to be in, and an MBA is a really great way to identify what you're already strong in, identify what you could grow on, and help you position yourself to market yourself into a new industry.
Now, Taylor, as a second year, anything that you want to add there, or any other kind of sort of surprises for how the MBA prepared you, maybe more or maybe not as well as you thought it might have?
Definitely. So I made a pretty extreme pivot. I went from HR to now investment banking. So I just finished my summer in investment banking and healthcare group at Cain Brothers and had a really great experience. And I can say that getting my MBA was definitely beneficial in that process. We at Johnson specifically have an investment banking immersion program that I knew I really wanted to participate in to give me the skills that I would need over the summer to be able to perform well. And that definitely happened for me and my classmates. So I would say my decision to get an MBA really helped me to pivot into the career that I wanted to be in.
Great. Anyone else want to add anything to that before we go on to the next question?
Yeah, I can add something. My pivot was probably less extreme. Like I was in research and advisory, so I was already kind of in the management consulting space, but I was creating solutions that could apply to a large client base. And I wanted to pivot to management consulting, which is where you deep dive into one single client organization. So for me, it was not just, it was an industry switch, but it was also a geography switch because I was moving from India to the US. And obviously, before I did that, I did quite a few informational interviews with people who had kind of already achieved what I wanted to achieve. And that kind of gave me a sense that the overlapping thing between all of them was that they had moved to the US to business schools. And that's where the process started for me as well. And arriving at business school, I realized why that's done. They have a very structured process. Like Cornell has for banking, Ross has something similar for consulting. It's a very structured program. There's an MBA second year coach assigned to you. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of support, but there's also a lot of guidance on what you're supposed to do on your own. So Ross kind of made it very easy for me to achieve that pivot.
Now, how about folks that decided, whether you're just at school now for a month or two and you've already sort of changed your mind, or for those who sort of further along, how about sort of changes in your career plans or thoughts for plans? Because often when we're coaching folks at Personal MBA Coach, we'll say, okay, look, come to us, like here's the plan, this is what you should say, what makes sense to you, and then once you get there, you might change your mind. And we did a survey years ago and found that over 80% of people actually sort of changed their mind. So for anyone that is going through that process or has already gone through that process, how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I can take this one. I actually came into McCombs specifically focused on operations for tech and telecom, and I'm now signed for CPG corporate finance that I got from a pre-MBA program recruiting event. And it's about curiosity is how I've seen it, is you have all these opportunities and different viewpoints and perspectives that come with the MBA program, not only from professors and faculty, but also from classmates as well, because we all have experience that we're coming with. So just soaking all that in, taking use of the resources that are available, and then taking the leap of curiosity. I don't know if I'll go into finance full time, but I said I want to be a well-rounded business individual, as an MBA prepares us for, and this is one of the opportunities to take.
Great. Anyone else want to add to that from your experiences?
I might add something. So the INSEAD MBA is pretty short, so it's only 10 months. So most of us try to come in with a pretty precise idea and then change their minds in just around 2 months. But from month 2, you have to have your mindset a little bit about what you want to do. Before starting my program, I'm never going to consulting, never going to go into consulting. And then I was talking to my career coach there, and he gave me like a great advice that the MBA is also for the long run. So it's not that the only only the first job after MBA that matters. So the career change is something that goes beyond the first job that you get, the first internship or the first job that you got after the MBA. So it's important that you develop a path to lead you where you want to do, where you want to go. And then I realized that consulting might make sense for me, and that's where I'm headed up to.
Great. So I'll ask something now, and we'll go to questions online. So folks online, feel free to keep asking questions. We will be, kind of going to them. We have some questions of our own, but let's talk a little bit about COVID and recruiting remotely and what that all is like. I know when I was talking with a lot of my clients, I've heard varying viewpoints on that. And so for those folks, especially for those folks who are a little bit more experienced and went through the MBA journey, before COVID came and before everything went virtual, how are the two sort of situations different, and any sort of thoughts or advice we'd have for folks if things do stay virtual, next year? And who knows what's happening at 1, 2, 3 years from now, but that's certainly a question that are on some applicants' minds today. So Taylor, maybe I'll let you get started.
Sure. So I did recruit in person for investment banking last fall, and now I'm a career work group leader helping the first years who want to recruit for investment banking in this fall in a virtual environment. And the most, I think, obvious difference that I've seen between my experience and theirs, which is starting now, is that our experience had a lot of in-person just social events. So even if we did have phone interviews or Zoom interviews, which we did last year in addition to our in-person informationals, this year all of their interactions have been virtual. But I have seen companies be able to pivot and do the same type of social events. So they might do trivia online via Zoom with a particular company, or just have a networking night with the company. So the touch points are still there. I think companies have done a great job so far to pivot in a way that the first years this year are still getting the same experience. And next year, if recruiting is not in person yet, I think that they'll have a kind of test run this year to be able to kind of keep what worked and maybe pivot to other situations for recruiting next fall. But I think that's the main difference.
Interesting. So Taylor, it sounds like things are not that different, and that there are still sort of events. Is there any silver lining here? It's hard to say silver lining and everything, and I hope everybody is staying safe these days. But is there an opportunity to do more because there are maybe fewer touch points, or are you not really seeing that happening?
I would say the silver lining for me looking at the first years this year is how much money they're saving on being able to not travel into the city every week. So I spent about 4 days out of the week for 6 or 7 weeks in a row traveling from Ithaca down to New York City to do my interviews and to meet with bankers. And this year, the first years will have to perhaps put the same amount of time aside, but they will be able to save a tremendous amount of money and not having to travel back and forth every week. And I think that could also help with their stamina and their mental health as well, of not, the opportunity to kind of be in your home. And so even if you're in interviews until 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m., you can then just turn off your laptop and enjoy yourself in your own apartment versus having to then make the trek back to wherever you are from at the end of your Friday. So I think that that's one definite benefit that they'll have.
Anybody else want to add anything here? And feel free to hear from the first years as well, who just have kind of a couple months under their belt.
Yeah, I think it's been quite an experience. I didn't even think about the cost of traveling. Yeah, that's a big savings on us. I think just starting out, it's good and bad because we haven't had the in-person experience. We don't have that to compare to. We're coming in fresh. We know that it's going virtual, and I got my internship completely virtual, so that's just how it is nowadays. But it is, yeah, of course, you miss those in-person events and the general networking that come with an MBA program. So it also increases the need to do much more work as well and send the touch points, send the emails, LinkedIn messages, and make up for the loss that we're incurring. So it's a balancing act.
Great. So any just kind of like off the shelf tips for recruiting for a new industry? And since we're talking about, switching careers and doing something different, how does that happen? Like when do you need to get this started? Some people are, coming to me, we're writing essays and they're already wanting to like network and research about the industry. And I'm saying, let's focus on getting the essays out of the way first. So, clearly I don't think you need to do it while you're writing the essays, unless you don't know anything about what you're writing. But like when did you start to do some of your research into this industry? Um,
Hey,
yeah,
so
Abhinav.
I can start. Yeah. So for me, I was clear that I wanted to end up in consulting after school. So to your question, I think the process started sometime after I was sure that I'm going to Ross, and I think how it starts there is, and I'll answer it with the benefit of hindsight, having gone through the process, is that I think it helps a lot in understanding why I want to join this industry, and also like identify the top companies that I'll be targeting and have a clear answer about why I'm interested in those companies. And obviously, these answers will evolve over time. Once you come to school, you'll learn a lot of new things which you probably didn't even know before. And that's absolutely fine. But it always helps that you kind of are able to answer those questions in terms of why this industry or why this particular company. And how you achieve that is you go on LinkedIn, find people who have an overlap between the schools you're interested in and the companies you're interested in, and ask them these questions. I mean, they more often than not, they're happy to help. Like why they pivoted from wherever they came from to consulting and why they were interested in this particular firm. And also like um, ask them about like any best practices, what they should follow. And it always helps because recruiting pretty much at Ross definitely, but I'm sure at every other school it starts pretty much on day one. I know, like Scott, what you said, it's true that many people aren't sure about what they want to do and they change, and that's fine. Like I said, you learn a lot of new things, but it always helps to come to school with some sort of clarity in terms of which direction you want to head in. And once you join the school, like I said, there's a massive support system inside the school system. So it's like advice I got as a first year fresh student was to trust the system. Any coach that's been assigned to you, follow the advice, make sure you're on top of all the deadlines, like your resume is ready on the right date, your cover letters, sort of like the key behavioral answers, you have the answers to all those questions. And yeah, if you stay on top of all these things, you will be improving your chances of success significantly.
And as far as timing, I think just to add to that, one thing that's been recommended to me is as soon as you get that .edu address, is that takes you so far. People are much more likely to respond to it and give you the time of day, just because they know that you're curious, you're back at school, you're looking to build your network, your knowledge, your skills, what have you. So as soon as you get that edu, it would be my advice.
Great. So we'll shift focus a little bit and take a question from the web. I know that when we were all writing our essays, we sort of thought about certain things that recruiters are looking for in different industries. There was a question. I'd be interested in understanding what background schools or recruiters look for when someone wants to switch to product management. And I get that question often because people are interested. Product management sounds interesting, right? This is something that people are doing. It sounds exciting. What do I really need to go into that? So if anyone wants to jump in and address that either from your own experience or just talking with kind of friends or coworkers.
um, I can probably take a pass at this. I obviously didn't recruit heavily for product management, but it was definitely uh, a plan B for me, and that's a common thing that you see. Like consulting is a plan A, but people also like don't ignore tech. That's people keep that as a plan B, and often the situation is that most of these people want to exit consulting in a few years, get into tech. So for product management, I think one thing you need to be mindful of that tech recruitment in general is not as structured as consulting and maybe even banking. Um, Obviously, there are way more tech companies than consulting companies, so you'll probably have to put in more effort in terms of networking, and not just, they might not care so much about like, have you got like referrals is someone like pushing your resume forward. But like these will be informational interviews. For example, Google, I understand, definitely requires their product management candidates to have a background in engineering, whereas Amazon doesn't care so much about that. So getting this information will be important, and it's obviously you'll be networking with the big ones, but then there are many other tech companies, like people are very excited about those, like for example Spotify, Netflix. I think the first thing would be like what I said, gathering the right kind of information. And the second thing is that consulting interviews focus more on general like skills, like how do you solve problems. But I think tech interviews require some content knowledge as well. So you should have an understanding of, if you want to get into product management, you want to have some sense of how products are developed, how that journey plays out. Obviously, by no means do you need to be an expert, but you need to have a high level sense of how it works. You also should have a good sense of how like the technology in general works, like how does cloud work, how does anything else that might show that you're interested in technology on your resume. You should probably have a good understanding of that. So it'll probably be helpful that you start kind of revising all those things. So, and tech casing in general is similar to consulting cases, the problem solving, but it also adds the content. Like you should have a good sense of how product management works. Yeah, I think that would be my advice for that.
Great. No, thank you so much. It's super helpful. And I remember back in the day when I was an undergrad at MIT, someone told me I should, recruit for this product job at Google, and I had to look up what Google was. So that tells you how old I am. And there was a lot of content knowledge. And don't do what I did. So I ended up doing consulting. So clearly, I think I got like the third round into this interview, and then that was it. But I was like online looking up the different Google products while I was in my interview. So try not to do that. But sorry, Taylor, I think you were going to add something.
It was really quickly. Thank you. So three of my Johnson classmates come to mind when I think about product management, and all three of them were in different industries prior to going into tech product management. One of them now is at Google, Apple, and Intuit in the product management space, but they were in commercial banking, entrepreneurship, and consulting prior to business school. So all of them pivoted successfully in the process. And I think that they just use the Johnson CMC or career management services resources in order to prepare for their interviews and the experiences that they would have. So I would definitely say that there's not necessarily a particular background maybe that the admissions teams look for, but more so that you have a good story for why you want to pivot and are ready to do the preparation work that it will take.
Great, thank you. So I have a specific question for Manolo. So Manolo, how did you shift your verticals in the industry? Was it smooth for you? Does MBA help justify the movement across the verticals because the coursework, et cetera, would be irrelevant?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll let you know how it goes once I start the internship. But no, all of the resources, and Taylor kind of touched on this, the career management services of all these universities are top notch. That's why these are top notch universities. Utilizing them, knowing what resources you have, it's extremely important. Was it smooth for you? I'd say it was a lot of work, because in thinking back to the previous question about product management, you have to start learning about a new field that you have no experience in. So taking the time to look at, for finance, for valuation models, for cash flow models, for P&L statements, going through complete financial statement analysis, all of these things that I really had never done before, and just getting into the nitty gritty. The MBA does, I would say, help with the movement across the verticals, especially going from not only for me operations, sales to finance, but also my background is also in tech. So from tech to CPG, so you're not only changing verticals, you're changing industries. And the MBA does give you that credibility that you come in and your goal is to shift. Okay, great. He or she is taking the education to be able to shift. So you gain a little bit of credibility as well. I think that would be my answer to that.
So here's another question that I think really anyone can answer. I might call on somebody if nobody jumps in. But how is pre-MBA work experience assessed when switching industries? And of course, this does vary a little bit based on the industry. We talked about this, a bit beforehand. But what I'll just rephrase this a little bit. What's important to recruiters, and for anyone who has experience in HR, maybe this is also helpful to kind of weigh in on. I might be singling out one person here, but yeah, anyone who want to talk about a pre-MBA experience kind of matters here versus just doing well in the interviews themselves.
Yeah, I can try to speak to that. So obviously it's going to vary, like you said, across different industries. And I haven't been on the other side of the desk, so grain of salt. But I think it's really important to recruiters for you to explain what you did succinctly, especially if you're coming from like a niche industry. Barely anybody knew what I did, and I didn't have 15 minutes to explain the in and outs of it for them. So me distilling it down into a really tight couple-minute pitch of this is what I did and this is why it matters and what skills it brought me. I think recruiters really appreciate you translating your experience really well into a why this makes me a compelling candidate.
Anybody else want to add to this?
Yeah, maybe I can add something. On top of that, this applies also to the product manager that we were topic that we were assessing earlier. I think that also the MBA gives you a lot of different opportunities throughout the program, which is not only the summer internship, for instance. So you have to be, as soon as you figure out more or less in which direction you want to go, it's really important that you start choosing the right opportunities that you have to make the most of it. So beyond the internship, whatever networking experience or additional training that you can get, or product games if it's for product management or something like that. So something that helps even the recruiter draw a line and tell a story from where you were, where you want to be. As a career switcher, that's usually important, that you're able to tell a story from where you've been to where you want to go. Pre-MBA work experience matters, as Katie was saying, in terms of which skills you have and what you can bring to the table in the new industry you're going to. If some people even try to do a pre-MBA internship sometimes in a field that's somehow connected to where they want to go, but it's not something that 100% of the student population did. So it might help, might not. So it's not necessary, probably. That's my personal background.
So while we're on you, we have another question specifically, for you. Can you talk about how INSEAD prepared you for consulting? INSEAD is very well known as a good school to prepare for consulting. What does that really feel like? What are some of these opportunities to highlight for folks?
Yeah, so INSEAD is a bit known as being a consulting school, so there is a lot of it that revolves around consulting, from consulting in the companies coming over to campus and really advertising it. I think even the core curriculum is built around that, so INSEAD is pretty generalist. There is no specific focus on finance, so there is, of course, some finance involved, but it's a school that aims at giving you a pretty well-rounded curriculum focused on strategy. There are some opportunities, of course, to dive deep into case prep and into running mock interviews to prepare for that. Of course, the program is pretty fast. So once you decide you want to try for internships into consulting, you have to move very quickly, because you start in December, in early January, and the first consulting interviews are in March. Otherwise, there is in the fall. So you have quite some time, and they give you all the necessary tools to network, to prepare for case prep, for case interviews. So you have a different set of tools. And again, it's a lot about making good choices among the hundreds of opportunities that you have in an MBA. And I think every MBA is similar to that, in a way that you're presented with countless opportunities every day, and you really have to pick what's best for you, what's best for your story, and where you want to go. So that's about it.
Great. So let's see. So here's an interesting question. So does a CFA, FRM, interest employers to facilitate career switch to finance? For folks maybe that are not in finance, whether it's IT product development folks or things like that. And this is a question I'd love to have some people answer, and we can even broaden this further, right? To answer a question which is a totally different question, but how important are these types of things? CFA 1, 2, 3. I've a lot of folks. Coming to us, whether it's just to get into business school or to get a job. I have CFA level 3, but my quant score is 42 on the GMAT. I think that's going to be enough, right? And then I'm like, I don't know. So maybe I'll let some of you jump in here. Katie, you were kind of nodding a little bit before, so I don't know if you wanted to kind of jump in and start here.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I came from nonprofit arts, and so I was very worried that my lack of, sort of financial skills would negatively impact me during recruiting. So taking these exams and certifications was definitely something I considered. Personally, I decided either through, sort of both talking to people that I had met during recruiting and talking to fellow students that taking the CFA while I was at school wasn't going to be helpful for me. I already had like Lucia was saying, you have very little time and a lot of things to do. And that wasn't something that made the cut for me. I don't think it very negatively impacted my recruiting process because I had shown I had gotten into a good school and I had been doing fine in the finance courses. So that seemed to translate just fine. That being said, it can never hurt to show that you're dedicated, you put in the time, and that you did accomplish this achievement. But from my impression, and again, totally personal, I don't think it's going to, if you are not ticking the boxes in other areas, I don't think that certification is going to put you over the edge. So yeah, I'd welcome other perspectives though.
Yeah, I think to add to that, my advice that I've been given when recruiting for different opportunities, especially when career switching, is they're hiring, they know that you don't know it yet. And that's okay because you're at school to learn it. So if exactly what Katie said, if you show the initiative that you're going for the CFA, that you want to get that certification to be better prepared, great. Like that shows your passion and how interested you are in the role. But no one's saying that that's included in the job description. So because of how high level and sometimes high pressure the MBA can be, I would be weary of adding that to your plate. If you can manage it, if you can do it, great. But employers don't have it on an internship requirement description for a reason. They want to teach it to you.
Any other perspectives from anybody? Or I see heads nodding.
I can add something. For example, when I was recruiting for consulting, so I don't think it ever came up. Like I know quite a few of my classmates had done varying degrees of CFA, maybe from level 1 to 3, but it never came up during the recruiting process. I don't think there was any correlation between having a CFA or getting a consulting interview. So my answer would be similar. I don't think it's a differentiating factor, but obviously it can never hurt.
And I'll add from the admissions consulting advice standpoint, and we do a lot of career advising of personal MBA coach. Of course, admissions consulting to get into school, it really doesn't matter that much. It can help a little bit if the quant is low and you have some of these, but it's a lot of work to do these exams. So it's not really a huge factor. So here's a question in general. And when we are showing the question, we're not showing your school. So we'll make believe we don't know what school you're from, so that we don't have to talk badly about any school. But jokes aside, how strong is the respective school with interview prep, career support, et cetera, for career switch? And I know this will vary across schools. As you're going through this, maybe I'll rephrase this a little bit as well. Well, this is, did you take a varied approach, school resources, other network, and like how much does the school really help you versus there are things at the school, but then you're really wanting to sort of go out and do some things on your own as well.
I can start this one. So obviously as an MBA 1 student, I was recruiting for MBA, and as an MBA 2 student, I was a career coach at Michigan. I was helping MBA1 students. So in terms of the second part of this question, I'd say the school resources are pretty much the foundation of your recruiting efforts. But it does help if you go over and above that and use your existing network or use LinkedIn in general to make some extra connections. So I think how it usually starts here is, and I'm familiar with some of the other schools as well, is that when you start school probably in September, there's a structured program. So obviously you're doing all your MBA classes and clubs, but a third track and probably the most important track for a while is the recruiting track. In terms of September, the schools will focus on helping you, finishing your resume. October, you'll start working on behavioral questions. You'll start working on case interviews. So again, like I can speak for my school, that Michigan did a really good job for preparing us for September. Most of us were new. And when it comes to career switchers, most of us were career switchers. And so it didn't really hurt that if you're making an extreme pivot, it's not like you're behind. You're pretty much where everyone else is. And I can say is if you follow the system, if you follow the school resources properly from September till December, which is the peak recruitment period for schools in the US at least, you'll be in a pretty good place by January, which is when the interviews actually start. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it always helps to like start reaching out to people on LinkedIn. Like I could tell from my Gartner network, which was pre-MBA, there were second degree connections on LinkedIn who were working in the firms I was interested in. So it always helped reaching out to them and, sort of asking questions, which I would be hesitant asking someone through the school network. So that helped quite a bit as well.
I can jump in and just say that Johnson welcomes career switchers. And so we have a very robust program in place or programs in place to help folks who want to switch or make pretty extreme jumps, like me, for example, who want to go from HR to investment banking. And we have the two main ways that people do that are through the Career Management Center and our individual counselors and directors that we have for each vertical that people are, or each industry that folks are recruiting for. And then second are our student run clubs. So for example, the Old Ezra Finance Club, we have our recruiting process in the fall down to a science. So there is a very specific steps that folks follow or students follow every fall and every week in order to get through the different hurdles in recruiting, especially if you're a career switcher. And we have also programs in place in different, like people who are designated as VPs of education, for example, who help people like me who are career switchers in particular, but everybody in general with technical questions or behavioral questions. And we have different workshops that we do. So there are definitely different ways to get through the recruiting process if you're a career switcher. And a lot of that is facilitated by Johnson. I will say, however, if you do have connections in your own networks, that's awesome to be able to use that as well. I definitely leaned on some of my Howard connections from undergrad at different points during recruiting. So I think between Johnson's really strong career switching program and existing relationships that I had within the financial services industry, I was able to successfully pivot into my new career.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Katie, I think you were going to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think, all of these schools are great and top schools, and that undoubtedly comes with top, career development centers. But a great resource for me was my fellow classmates. There was a ton of career switchers and a lot of people who were, previously in XYZ consulting firm who wanted to switch into iBanking. But if you're interested in XYZ consulting firm, they have years of knowledge to give you. So it's really important to get to know your fellow classmates, get to know their journeys, because often they can give you a lot of insight.
So I have a question for folks here. How many of you wrote about switching careers in your applications versus wrote about, I'm looking at some of the smiles to get a sense for, versus, you wrote about something that, well, might have sounded a little bit more similar to what you were doing previously?
So for me, oh, sorry, Taylor, you started talking Okay. So for me, in my application was I had more or less an idea what I wanted to do. I think as a career switcher, again, it's important to tell a story. So to make clear to everyone in the audience where you're from and where you want to go. Also because the admission committee is assessing your risk as a potential student. So how the MBA fits into your general path. Although the path might not be completely clear yet, but it's important that you have a clear idea when you write down the essay. Then nobody will come to you with the essay and say, "No, you wrote down that you want to go into consulting. Why do you say finance, corporate finance now?" So nobody will ask you to explain why you change your mind during an MBA. I mean, it's done for that, but the story needs to be there. It needs to be clear why you want to make a career switch and the motives behind it. And the motives actually will say you might change the target, but what's behind in the story will say throughout the MBA. This will not change. It's the reason why you wanted to do that. And I mean, for some profiles, it's easier than the others to explain why you're going you're pursuing an MBA, especially if you have a non-traditional background. It's a bit harder to explain why you want to go for an MBA. I used to work in factories, and my background is in the shop floor, so it's a weird environment to come from for an MBA. But the more it is like that for folks, the more it's important. The more important it is to clarify how the MBA fits into your personal story. Then you might change your mind along the way, but the reason why you're going for that needs to be clear. And for me, was I wanted to move into a different sector, tackle bigger problems, and I mentioned I wanted to work into consumer goods. And actually, if I can, that's more or less my target as a consulting industry, so the consulting sector. We'll see about that. Right now, it's not defined yet, but I mean, that's the important thing to mention, I think.
Great. Thank you. And Taylor, I'll let you jump in here next.
Sure. So I did not write about investment banking in my admissions essay, which is why I was laughing. I wrote that I wanted to pivot into wealth management. One, because there's kind of already a pathway to do that internally at Bank of America. So I used that as a part of my story. Like, I want to get an MBA to get the additional skills, but there would be a way for me to do this that would be easier, that if I just went back to my bank, which, to the point about riskiness and the admissions team, about folks getting jobs post MBA, I thought that really mitigated that risk. And then two, I actually had a nonprofit financial education business prior to business school that I started because of my interest in finance. So that also aligned with the wealth management story. But once I got to Johnson, once I was in and I was here on the first day, I wanted to recruit for investment banking, and I did it successfully. And Johnson was really supportive. Nobody called me out for what was or was not in my resume. They just hit the ground running and trying to help me get an internship, and I did. So in my opinion, if you have a slightly better story that might help you in your admissions essay, then, as long as your skills back that up, as Lucia said, then I think you'd be okay.
So here's a question for a lot of folks, and we have schools in different parts of the country and different parts of the world with INSEAD here. How much did geographical location factor into your choice, if anything? Given, and I'll broaden this, either the industry you're targeting, or just other sort of recruiting needs in general. I know we talked a little bit about traveling to companies and things like that, for schools that are not in major cities. So did the geography play a role for anybody here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that, especially since Charlottesville is kind of in the middle of Virginia. Where closest major metropolitan is probably DC, 2 hours away, or Richmond, 1 hour away. So it definitely gives people pause. For me, it didn't give any pause because I went here undergrad, but it definitely, is a consideration. I think the best guidance is to look at research what companies actually come to the school if you're looking at somewhere that's kind of remote. So for us, instead of traveling, most of the major companies, not in this virtual environment, but in years past and hopefully in years future, they actually travel to Charlottesville for the express purpose of recruiting on grounds here. So distilling that information to see if you have to do a lot of travel, if you're going to have to go to New York every weekend or anything like that. Whereas, some programs, they are lucky enough to have the companies go here. And then additionally, I think a good thing is to look at the alumni network in your target city. Even if I know I wanted to go somewhere on the East Coast, so I said we're pretty far away from New York, but I know that Darden has a really, really strong alumni network in New York. So that's what led me to, not consider that a deterrent into coming here. So alumni networks are huge as well.
I can also add something from a consulting perspective. In consulting, location does not matter at all. Pretty much every consulting firm you can think of will be coming to your campus. So we were also in Ann Arbor. The major city is probably Detroit, but most people from Ross end up in Chicago, which is almost 4 to 5 hours away. And so obviously the big consulting firms come on campus, and they actually have a heavy presence on campus. There will be probably someone full-time working out of our Ross building. But also many of the smaller consulting firms also show up. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the country. I think when it came to tech, again, most of the big tech companies, even if they didn't have a permanent presence on campus, they came quite often. And in terms of the smaller tech companies, for example, the Tech Club at Ross organized a tech trek. So sometime during October fall break, I think most of us went to San Francisco. And the Tech Club had done some of the pre-networking work for us. So we already had meetings at different companies, smaller tech companies, which couldn't come to Ann Arbor. So the location for me did not matter at all. But when it came to banking, for example, I know many of my classmates were traveling pretty much every week from Detroit to New York, which I thought was, it sounds stressful, it sounds expensive. So if you're into banking, that's something you might want to look at. But consulting tech, I don't think it's of great consequence, the location.
Yeah.
So as we're getting close to wrapping up here, before I thank everyone, this has been a fantastic panel, super fun. Any closing thoughts for folks? And maybe I'll let two of you kind of jump in, 2 or 3 of you jump in with any closing thoughts or advice for people as they're thinking through their application journeys.
I can kick us off here. One thing I'd recommend is be there, show up, show your interest, show your passion. Texas McCombs was the only MBA school I applied to, so it was all or nothing. I went to the webinars, I chatted with current students, I sent emails to the admission teams. I even did research for the working professional program in Dallas because I knew I wanted to stay in Texas. So showing all of that interest and going the extra mile and doing the research and talking to alumni as well will set you apart. And I believe it's a big factor of why they let me back in. Hopefully that was the factor. But to show that passion, to show that interest, I think goes a long way. And now being on this side of the table, I know it does. So for sure, show your passion, show your interest, be there, show up.
Great. Thank you, Manolo. Katie?
Yeah, and I think especially when you are switching careers and you might not have a lot of experience going into your target career, and you're competing with these people with quote unquote like perfect resumes and perfect work experience, it's really easy to kind of let the doubt and imposter syndrome kind of creep in. As soon as you can just recognize that and know that people have made bigger leaps than you, people have made the leap that you're currently making right now, and you can do it successfully. As soon as you can like try to quash the little voices in your head, any doubts, it's going to just come off even better in your own applications, and you're going to come off more strongly. So just 100% go for it. You can do it. People have done it in the past. So just try to be confident in yourself and your journey.
I think that's great advice. And I would also say, make sure that you're doing the research and thinking about what you want to see in your own career post MBA, and make sure that the strength that the schools you are applying to match with what your career goals are, and see that if you are a pretty major career switcher, see if other folks that go to that school or other alum typically make those types of jumps as well. And in addition to careers, also think about just the two-year experience that you want to have, right? So I lived in New York City prior to business school. I wanted to go back. I also knew that I wanted to get out of the city for 2 years. So Johnson was the perfect intersection for me. That was somewhere that was career switcher friendly, had a great reputation in the Cornell University brand, and was outside of the city. So Ithaca's gorgeous, and it's not too far from New York City. So even if I did have to travel back and forth, it wasn't bad. And I got to come back and get some fresh air too.
And one sort of closing thought, for me, which kind of goes along with what Katie mentioned before, definitely don't give up. When I was at Wharton, I was already running personal MBA coach. I started this when I was a first year student, but I was building up on the side for the first little bit. And I remember submitting a resume there was a job at Amazon, and I feel like must have been over 200 people that submitted resumes, and there were two people that came to interview. So I think it was like 24 that got it invited. So most people didn't get it. And I really was interested, and I was one of those. I had no idea about product man. I didn't end up getting the job, but I didn't get the invitation. And so I went down to career services, and I saw which room they were in, and I walked outside, and I said, "Here's my resume. I'm not on your list. I think I should be, and would love to chat today. And I'll sit outside the office all day, and you come and find me if you want to chat anytime." And they came out, they chatted. I got a couple of rounds in, didn't end up getting the job, but always keep trying and keep pushing. Obviously, not too aggressively, but keep trying, because you never know who's going to be interested in you that day. And for 10 times that happens, maybe one time it works out. So we're just over time, so I should wrap this up. But Taylor, Manolo, Avinav, Lucia, Katie, thank you so much. Really appreciate all the helpful words of advice. This was a lot of fun. Applicants, stay safe. Best of luck. Feel free to reach out if you want any help or guidance in the process, and watch the rest of this series. So thank you, everyone, and best of luck.
Thank you.